by any chance?
Yes, I do.
You do?
I do, yeah.
I would love to know. First, announce on... what's your Christian?
I'm Paul.
Paul Simba Arati. That's a nice name. I wonder why you hardly use it. Anyway, gentlemen, it's a D-Day for Kenya as the UN picks a new head. And our very own Mheshimiwa Amina Mohamed, the CS Foreign Affairs, is a front runner in this against a candidate from Chad. They're looking for somebody to take over from South Africa's Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. Now we are told whether Kenya lands a post at the African Union that analysts say will enable the country to influence affairs on the continent will be known today. And this happened at a time when the United Nations is quite interested in Africa. Remember, the new UN Secretary, Antonio Guterres, is actually in Ethiopia, and he's been meeting several heads of states. But before we look at this, I'm happy that we have Yusuf. Yusuf has worked at the UN for some time, if I checked right.
Yes, yeah. I worked as an advisor to the new Secretary General.
Ah, Antonio Guterres.
Yes.
So he's a person you know very well. And you'll maybe tell us later in the show if he has the capability or the character, given the challenges in the world today. But first, I'll go to my director and request that we had our very own Jackie Maribe consulting or reporting to Hussein Mohammed last night. Could we just have the clips shortly?
It really is down to the wire here, Hussein. By this time tomorrow, we should be having an indication as to who becomes the next chair of the African Union Commission, taking over from Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. Now, the Kenyan delegation appears very optimistic. We were able to hear from the vice chair of the Special Cabinet Committee tasked with the lobbying for their colleague, Ambassador Mohammed.
Well, we have put a strategy in place that was very effective, and so far we are optimistic. But elections are elections, they are unpredictable. You don't know what will happen. But we are certain this is Kenya's time.
The Francophones appear to be ganging together. We have a candidate from Chad, we have a candidate from Senegal, and we have a candidate from Equatorial Guinea. Now, the Anglophones are from Botswana and Kenya, and this is where they are drawing the line in terms of support, even as regional blocs seek to ensure that one of their own takes the seat. President Kenyatta, we do understand, was able to have at least 5 bilateral meetings this afternoon to seek support from his counterparts in the African continent. But there is also the question of Morocco and her readmission into the African Union. Now, Morocco is said to be a very strong supporter of Chad, and Morocco's debate was meant to come right before this African Union election, and whether or not she would have a say in that will be determined once the heads of state and government begin this African Union summit tomorrow.
I think the understanding up to last night is let's sort out with the issues of African Union and the issues of the elections, and then we can discuss with the issue of Morocco joining back the African Union.
Now, it is also a question of alliances. One would have expected a country, for instance, such as Djibouti, which is an IGAD member, to have supported the Kenyan candidate. However, we were able to support the Djibouti president with his Senegalese counterpart, President Macky Sall. They were in a meeting where we do believe Djibouti expressed her support for Senegal's candidate, and this is a situation we are seeing in Gambia, and for obvious reasons what happened with the election and the transition of power there. We understand therefore that Gambia will be throwing her weight behind the Senegalese candidate as well. I'm Jackie Maribe from the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
A very detailed report there by our very own Jackie Maribe. Thank you very much, Jackie. Like I said, gentlemen, this is a very spirited show by Kenya towards the leadership of the African Union at a time when we have crisis in Somalia, we have a situation in South Sudan, we have Kenya's relations strained a bit with the United Nations some time back. But I'm happy that from the reports we have, the President yesterday had a meeting with your former boss, United Nations new Secretary General Antonio Guterres, and they agreed that Kenya is indeed taking back its troops to Sudan, and the United Nations has offered to give Kenya the command for Darfur. I will start with you, Mheshimiwa Hussein. Shed some light.
Well, first of all, I'm very pleased that in fact we are back to discussing and getting a clear understanding with the United Nations. We were treated very badly by the previous Secretary General in South Sudan, which forced the withdrawal of our forces and strained relationship. We now have a new Secretary General who is a former Prime Minister of Portugal, a politician, as well as someone with the ability to engage with politicians. And to a certain extent, I see that there's a good chemistry between him and our President, and that matter has been sorted. And Kenya is now back to the position where it was before, of leading Africa in terms of peacekeeping, contributing to the settlement of conflicts within our region. And I'm glad that has been sorted out. The second element also of which you touched on, which is of Amina, is that we are also very fortunate to have a person of such a high caliber. We're offering the African Union and the people of Africa a superb, well-qualified and articulate person who can lead the organization into the 21st century to become a leading regional organization in the world, to bring Africans together. And I think also we're offering the first person from East Africa for such a position. So I think in both cases, whatever the politics of the African Union is that Kenya has the best chance of coming out with its cabinet secretary being elected as the chairperson of the African Union Commission, which will be very important development for us as a regional player.
Before I invite Mheshimiwa Paul Simba Arati, just tell us more, in view of what is happening now and what happened over the weekend in Kolbio. The Nation has it on page 18, the Standard I think has it on page 8, the attack on the Kenyan camp, the UMISOM camp.
Well, I mean, the Kenya Defence Force has explained the circumstances of that attack and how they were able to stop the attackers and inflict a very big defeat to Al-Shabaab that it has never suffered in any of the clashes that we've had since AMISOM has gone into Somalia. I think it is important for us to continue to give support to our forces. First of all, I send the condolences to the fallen heroes who died defending our country, defending our region's peace and security. The second point that I'd like to add is that we must keep on supporting the peace process in Somalia until we're able to roll back and defeat elements like Al-Shabaab. People forget when they say that Kenyans should rethink their Somali position. They forget that Kolbio is on the Kenyan border.
Actually, a short distance from
it is on the Kenyan border. One side of the border is Kolbio, the other side is in the Somalia Kolbio. It's some few miles into Somalia.
So it's actually the border.
Exactly.
Our forces are supposed to protect
if Al-Shabaab is ready to attack us on our borders, a withdrawal or a retreat would mean they would be attacking our capital city, they will be attacking our main port, they will be attacking every town in northern Kenya. That should not be allowed to happen. We must keep on our peacekeeping efforts. We must keep on the fight against terrorism until elements of that particular terrorism organization is willing to discuss issues politically and sit at the table and discuss issues in a process with the other Somalis who want peace and stability. And we must continue supporting the Africa Union forces in Somalia.
Well said, Mheshimiwa Hassan. Mheshimiwa Simba Arati, your take on Kenya's quest for the position of the African Union chair vis-a-vis the politics of Africa?
First, yes, we know that Amina is our own from within. But, I have a different view, contrary to what my colleague...
Share your views, please.
Yeah, because we have seen Amina is one of the persons who have facilitated the treaties which have been signed by the president before, which has siphoned a lot of money, from the country. Two, those treaties which have been signed by the president.
Like which one particularly?
A number of them, the monies that the president, countries which have come in. We have seen so many presidents come into the country. We have not seen exactly what they have come to give, including Turkey. Is it Turkey? This is
You had President Erdogan.
No, there is one I want not Turkey.
My colleague is usually articulate, seems to be completely confused.
There is one tweet that I want to just look into, where and including the president is is entrenched, where they have signed a number of them, which they have not explained to the Kenyans, and the money which either we have borrowed is money meant to come from the taxpayers' money. Therefore, the point that yes, we are supporting our own, we wish our well, of course, to take on the issues of Africa as compared to other candidates who are coming up. My worry is that we'll get into, of course, into big problems with many countries, except that Amina, of course, she did it very well in the ICC issue, where our president and deputy were left.
But Mheshimiwa Simbarati, much as you've not been able to tell us which exactly these treaties are, you remember during the tenure of Amina Mohamed as Foreign Affairs CS, Kenya's ranking in the diplomatic world has really shot her.
You're talking of ranking?
Yeah, relations with other countries.
Precisely, but we have seen number of those countries which have come into the country. They've not told us a number of those treaties they have brought in. What economical?
So your issue is the amorphous nature of these treaties.
Precisely. You see, what is happening is that we suspect that the treaties they've gone into is our children will get into, where debts we are seeing the country has gotten into through the regime of President Uhuru, through his own envy that he was put in the office. Therefore, there is nothing much that we can celebrate out of Amina's appointment.
Your concerns there, Mheshimiwa Lonyangapuo, you have been a career civil servant. You have been part and parcel of some of these treaties. Probably you shed light to us. Has the Foreign Affairs Ministry got anything to do with these treaties?
Thank you. I want to correct my neighbor here. CS Amina is in charge of foreign affairs. The people who normally deal with any kind of treaty relating to money is Treasury. So CS National Treasury would be the best person to actually answer some of these questions where money is involved. So to me, I worked with Amina as my colleague. She was PS then, I was PS. One of the best officers we have in this country is we need to give credit where it's due. And so personally, I want to wish her well today, because I think Africa needs now to face east for once. Kenya is positioned strategically in the east for us to, and we need to project ourselves. I mean, it has just come from the south, South Africa. The next stop over should be Kenya. And Africa depends on the four pillars of the continent: South Africa, Kenya in East Africa, Nigeria on the other side, and possibly Egypt in the north. So to me, I think Amina is our best candidate, and we should pray for her. As to know what role, her role is simply facilitation and making sure that nations that normally come here come to visit, and bilateral agreements are normally there. Not necessarily financial, but business. You know, you can sometimes enter into an agreement for the sake of, so that you can have your goods going to.
So it's socio-economic and political.
A lot of it in common. But money normally comes from institutions like World Bank, the
IMF,
and so on, European Union, things like that. So I think we need
it's good.
I'll come to you, Jonathan.
It's good that Prof is saying that it's related into business and other. What major business that have you seen when Amina was in office?
Well, in fact, she has raised our profile. We are now a major player, not only in African affairs but international affairs. We are punching above our weight now than any other country.
We are talking about profile.
Yes,
we are talking about profile.
We've had more international conferences held in Nairobi under her watch than any other government.
Actually, if you listen, if I could just take you through what the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said yesterday, and I quote, "We have confidence in Kenya, and we know that Kenya is strategically placed to influence a lot of issues in relation to strong diplomatic and democratic traditions. Kenya is a champion of accountability, and on that account, President Uhuru Kenyatta has been invited into a small group of global leaders that will be talking about issues like peacekeeping, democracy, and the rest by one and only Antonio Guterres."
Absolutely. Our role is being recognized internationally by everybody.
That's right. But what accountability? We're talking about accountability in the country. This government is one of the governments which
but
is
that's
not
a discussion of another subject for discussion.
No, this is what he has read. This is what he has read out.
The point of meat here, where rubber meets the road here, is he says Mheshimiwa Amina Mohamed presided over a foreign affairs ministry that influenced and had a role to play in Kenya's positioning in the international world, signed the treaties.
But he has not been able to give us a single example. He's completely tongue-tied and confused about it.
Yeah, so that he's just
taking a political position.
South Africa, the president of South Africa was here. South Korea, the president was around. But the president that who has been sent home, where they had a number of even...
as a member of parliament, you have the right to scrutinize and expose some of those things, but you don't have any.
I've just said about South Korea.
Actually,
you're not doing
South Korea.
The South Korean issue, just for the sake of our viewers, the South Korean issue is an internal issue in South Korea. They're building a stadium. The president has been associated with a company from Austria that apparently had a lot of influence in seeking tenders for the construction of the stadium. So it's got nothing to do with the international relations.
If you have seen any country that has gotten into any other country that has come into the country, they have had problems, including South Africa, South Korea, those close friends of President Uhuru. Therefore, there is nothing that we are talking about that has facilitated indeed, and it's smooth sailing through process.
Are you seeing politics in this, Jonathan? Let me come to you. More as a politician. One, there are those who have been saying this is a way of Kenya. The government is pushing so much so that Amina gets off the scene nationally, so that they have somebody else in that ministry. She's growing bigger than the room and such like things. Are you seeing politics in this?
I'm seeing the foreign policy of the country getting a notch higher. Sorry, my voice is a little hoarse today. Okay. I was campaigning in Embakasi all day yesterday, asking people to register to vote.
We're talking about that.
Yeah, I think it's raising the foreign policy of the country a little higher. To understand Amina, you have to look at her background. First of all, I'd like to say she's that good because she was trained by and mentored by my party leader, Kalonzo Musyoka, when he was foreign minister several years ago. But she's moved up from being, an ambassador to a PS. She's been an assistant secretary general of the United Nations. She's got quite some experience behind her. She's done fairly well as a foreign cabinet secretary and also in charge of international trade. I guess that's what Mheshimiwa Arati is talking about. And it brings the country some status in Africa. It looks like now through Amina we're beginning to look kind of externally. Before we were just dealing with domestic issues within the African Union. But just talking a little bit about the election, it's going to be between Mahamat of Chad and Amina Mohamed. And what we need to understand is the politics of the Francophone, which are the French-speaking countries, and the Anglophone, which is the English-speaking. If you remember, Ping was there before he did his 2 terms, then Mrs. Zuma came and did her 1 term. I guess she didn't want to do a 2nd term because she wants to be the president of South Africa. So it depends on whether the Anglophone countries are going to vote together and the Francophone countries are going to vote together. So really it's between those 2 candidates. And mine is to wish Amina well. I think it's good for the country because it will be seen in international light. If I found Amina, what I'd advise her is if she gets the position, her first, I'd suspect that her first call of duty will be to convince African states to move from the ICC. And I don't think that would be prudent. I think we in Africa, we still, and anyway the world over, we still need the ICC. It's constituted for a reason. I'm glad that the president had talks with Antonio Guterres, the new Secretary General of the UN, and I hope the new SG will convince the president also to rethink his stand of Kenya signing out of the ICC. That would take our foreign and international standing backwards. But for now, I do wish Amina well, and I think she'll put Kenya on the map. One of the things I hope that she will also take care of if she gets elected today is this Somalia issue. You know, Kenya went in, and I disagree with my friend Yusuf Hassan, MP for Kamkunji. Kenya went into Somalia. It was called Operation Linda Inchi, and went in to send a message that we are not a pushover when Al-Shabaab started coming into Kenya, attacking us and kidnapping Kenyan nationals.
And even tourists.
Yes, and tourists. If you ask cabinet ministers in the former President Grand Coalition, they'll tell you it was supposed to have been a 6-month deal. Now, I do support us taking care of our borders. I do support our troops, and our condolences to the families of those who lost their loved ones. Our gallant soldiers in Kolbayo in Somalia yesterday, on Friday morning. But I think we need to rethink our long-term engagement into Somalia. And I hope Amina will be talking with other African countries, because this is not a Kenyan problem, this is an international problem. Yeah, so that we get a long-term solution. We do need Kenya secure, we do need to be protected from terrorism, but we must have a plan. And our plan can't be occupying Somalia. I think our plan needs to be coming together as Africa, ensuring that Somalia is stable, yeah, and has a stable, democratically elected government that can take care of the Al-Shabaab in there. It should not be our problem. And we are seeing now, this is the second attack in just a few months, and it's beginning to hurt the morale of our soldiers. So we need a plan. And that's something that I'll be hoping Amina will take care of.
Gentlemen, I'll throw this question to all of you. Should our very own Amina Mohamed Jibril win in this election, and knowing the influence that African Union has on national policies of countries, most of the policies we place in our countries are influenced by what the African Union desires. Should she win, I mean, where does that place Kenya as far as policy issues are concerned?
I think it places Kenya a notch higher. This is the first time, actually, even in East Africa, that we are sending a candidate to be the chairman of the AU. If you've seen, the AU has become much more active now. Morocco is trying to get back in as a result of that. And the AU now needs to begin to play a bigger role in democratizing the country. And the AU is going to be watching our 2017 elections here to ensure that they are free.
Has the AU been quite vibrant, or as vibrant as it should be, when it comes to democracy in African states? We saw Jean Ping when he was AU chairman. Remember Ivory Coast, Laurent Gbagbo and Alassane Ouattara?
I think they have tried, but they have not reached the level where one would expect we should have reached as Africa. But the steps that are going on now, they are pointing to an indicator that we are headed in that direction. So AU should be able to address and look at all the African nations and globally position ourselves as the choice continent where most of the decisions are supposed to be done. I know America, Europe are now facing and looking in Africa, and by having somebody who is vibrant, Amina is one such candidate, if she wins, who can be able to cause things to move and allow people to freely engage. Africa has always been associated with a number of issues that are not right, and
civil strife,
some few notorious dictators, and so on. So, but it is time that we should come out of that and become democratic nations and play our role properly. Like now, this stubborn issue in our neighborhood, where everybody's trying to point fingers at Somalia, and we are permanent neighbors. And we went there for a purpose.
They say you can choose your friends, but you can't choose your neighbor.
You can't choose a neighbor. Now we need to reposition and realign ourselves in such a way that we know that we are not there just for a quick fix and come. What just happened the other day is a tragedy. It's so serious to the extent that we are losing young men, people who are defending their nation, and we are not hearing the same attacks taking place in the other African troops. The question is why?
But we had attacks in the Ugandan troops camp, we had attacks in the Burundi troops camp.
Kenya seems to be more hit than the others, if you can look at the data. And personally, I think we have a neighbor who thinks we maybe have gone too far or something like that. We need to relook ourselves as follows. I know my colleague there, Hassan, has said, where the place which took place, where this incident took place yesterday, is near along the border. First of all, let us reread our constitution. What our army is supposed to be doing to protect our borders. Do we have a border between Kenya and Somalia? Yes, it's a big stretch of over 1,000 kilometers. We need to see how we can plant our presence on our border and have a long stretch of about 5 kilometers or so, which is cleared. And you are on your side.
5 kilometers inside Kenya or inside Somalia?
Inside Somalia, because these are people who
so we should go inside Somalia.
We should, no, I mean, we are on our border, but you make sure that there is visibility. You know, you can be able to see. These people have been coming on using a car, isn't it? You have been watching them. They say they drive some explosives. If you have clearance, which you can be able to see from a distance, you can be able to detonate that car as it comes.
Yusuf, tell us a bit about the relationship between Kenyans and Somalis at the border, because that is where the real problem is.
I wanted to comment on the what Amina would do first. I think Amina, if she is elected today, will take over the Africa Union at a time when it needs to move further into reforms. For example, a better Africa in terms of trade, movement of people in between African countries. 2, in terms of keeping security of the African continent by consolidating the Africa standby forces, like in the last 2 weeks you saw the West Africans
ECOWAS moving into Gambia.
So Africa is changing. Africa is more democratic, and Africa needs to become an economic power. So she would be in a position to be able to reform further the African Union to make it much more effective in terms of us as a continent positioning ourselves economically, security-wise, and consolidating the democratic victories the African people have won.
Is democracy third by coincidence, or it's less important?
It is very important, because all African countries now subscribe to democracy. The Africa Union, and I have followed the history of the Organization of Africa Union and the Africa Union as it is now, used to tolerate dictators and military coups. When you took over a country's government by force, you went to Addis Ababa to be celebrated as the new leader. Africa does not tolerate the forceful and undemocratic change of governments anymore. So in a way, the democratic agenda in Africa is embedded in the African Union. There's no question about it. Coming on to the issue of
a quick one,
Somalia,
so that we take a commercial break, then we'll come back still on diplomacy.
Yes. On Somalia, is that Somalia is our neighbor. We are in Somalia because of our own interests, our security and defense interests. Al-Shabaab does not recognize borders. It does not recognize Kolbio as a border. Al-Shabaab's borders come all the way to Nairobi. They want a greater territory to control on the basis of their narrow religious interpretation of the world. Therefore, it is not going to respect. Secondly, when we went into Somalia, the main operational area of Al-Shabaab was on the Kenyan areas that are bordering Kenya. They had been removed from all over Somalia and limited to the areas along the Juba River, which is closer to our border. So we pose a major threat to the future existence and stability of Al-Shabaab as a movement, and that's why we bear the brunt of its attack. And I think if we want a long-term stability in Somalia, we should be looking at maybe changing the Africa Union forces into an international, a United Nations force, in which more countries can take part. But I can't see at any time, unless there is victory against Al-Shabaab in Somalia, for our troops not to be there defending our territorial integrity, but also working for peace and stability in Somalia and in the region, just as we are sending troops to Sudan, which you're happy about.
A quick one, because we need to take a commercial break. I'll give you 30 seconds to.
Yeah, our soldiers in Somalia, they are ill-equipped too. Let us agree with the system that is not properly working for the better of the nation. Those officers, the equipment they are using there, is the other day the president is launching so many vehicles at Urpak, whereas
how sure are you that they are ill-equipped?
There is reports. There are reports from the same forces who are manning our borders, and indeed is the results of what happened at Kulboy. Therefore, what we are saying, apart from these people being in Somalia, they need to be pulled out. There must be a strategy. There is no way. America the other day, Trump said, America first. We must make Kenya first, not Somalia first.
Okay, gentlemen, giving your thoughts on such a thorny, sensitive issue, issues relating to military, issues relating to diplomacy and all the rest. All we can do as a country is now wish Amina Mohamed Jibril the best as she goes for this. Remember, the Standard has given her biodata, born in 1961. She has served as ambassador, permanent representative to the UN. She's actually the first woman to serve as a Foreign Affairs Cabinet Secretary in Kenya, and the first woman to chair the General Governing Council of the World Trade Organization. She's a lawyer by profession and has also served as a United Nations Assistant Secretary General and the Deputy Executive Director at the UNEP here in Nairobi. When we come back, gentlemen, still on diplomacy, the row, the anger that Donald Trump's decisions and orders have made across the world. Remember, this is the news review segment of the Power Breakfast Show. I have Mheshimiwa Simba Arati, Professor John Lonyangapuo, Mheshimiwa Jonathan Mweke, and Mheshimiwa Yusuf Hassan. We'll be back after a short break.